There is a version of your life where nothing dramatic ever happens. No catastrophe, no scandal, no sudden collapse. Just a slow, quiet decline you barely notice. It doesn't begin with pain. It begins with comfort. You wake up tomorrow the same way you did today. Reach for the same phone. Think the same thoughts. Say, "I'll still start next week." And next week comes and goes. By the time you realize something is wrong, you wanted to be able to remember when it started. It's the terrifying part. Not the crash, the drift. At 30, you call it busy. At 40, you call it stress. At 50, you call it life. At 60, you call it regret. And regret is heavy. Heavier than failure. Heavier than loss. Heavier than grief. Because regret whispers only one thing. You knew. You knew you were sleeping too little. You knew you were postponing the hard conversations. You knew you were numbing yourself every night. You knew you were settling. You knew. But it didn't feel urgent. Nothing felt urgent. That's how it wins. There are habits that don't just look dangerous. They don't scream. They don't bleed. They don't break bones. They erode like water against stone. Drip, drip, drip. One day you look at your life and think, how did I get here? And the answer will not be a single decision. It will be 10 small ones, repeated daily, invisible, comfortable, deadly. Somewhere tonight an older version of you is watching this moment. They remember this exact season, the tired excuses, the delayed goals, the comfortable distractions. They wish they could reach through time and shake you, not to scare you, but to wake you up. Because the tragedy is not that life ends. The tragedy is that potential does. Slowly, quietly, before it's too late. There is still time, but time does not announce when it is leaving. And the habits you refuse to confront today are already shaping the life you will be forced to accept tomorrow. You once did lose everything at once. You to lose it, inch by inch, and you won't even notice, until something inside you feels permanently out of reach. Tonight we begin with a question that most people avoid. What if the greatest danger in your life is not what you fear, but what you tolerate? And what if the damage has already begun? Because the first habit is the one you still believe is harmless. It never feels dangerous in the beginning. That's why it survives. You tell yourself you're fine, used to functioning, used to paying the bills, used to showing up, used to surviving. And survival feels like success when you don't look too closely. There's a quiet agreement most people make with themselves. As long as nothing is falling apart, nothing needs to change. And for a while that seems true. Your health isn't collapsing. Your relationships aren't exploding. Your career hasn't imploded. Everything looks stable, but stability can be deceptive. There's a psychological phenomenon called normalcy bias. The belief that because something hasn't happened yet, it won't happen at all. We assume tomorrow will resemble yesterday. We assume small declines will correct themselves. We assume we have more time. History is full of people who believed they were safe. Empires that thought they were invincible. Markets that believed they would never crash. Families who assumed this is just a phase. They didn't see collapse coming, not because the signs weren't there, but because the signs were subtle, gradual, comfortable. And that's how your habits protect themselves. The first habit, the most dangerous one, is this: delaying discomfort. You delay the workout. You delay the apology. You delay the doctor test appointment. You delay the difficult decision. Because nothing forces you to act. Not yet. You say, I'll fix it when it becomes serious. But serious never announces itself with a trumpet. It whispers first. A little more fatigue. A little more resentment. A little more distraction. And you adapt. Humans are extraordinary at adapting to slow decline. You adjust to being slightly more tired, slightly less motivated, slightly more disconnected. You don't panic. You normalize it. Think about how quietly bad habits form. No one wakes up intending to ruin their health. They just skip one workout, then two, then they sit too busy. No one intends to drift apart from someone they love. They just avoid one uncomfortable conversation, then another. Then silence becomes easier than honesty. The illusion of safety is built on three dangerous beliefs. I have time. Yes, that's not that bad. I can fix it later. Each one feels rational. Each one feels calm. Each one slowly tightens around you like a soft rope. And here is the cruel truth. The longer you wait, the more expensive the repair becomes. A small crack in a foundation is easy to fix. Ignore it for years, and you're rebuilding the entire house. But early cracks don't scare us, because they don't hurt. Not yet. There's something comforting about believing life will warn us loudly before it changes permanently. We imagine there will be a dramatic wake-up call, a hospital bed, a breakup, a termination letter, a moment so shocking it forces transformation. But most damage does not arrive dramatically. It accumulates quietly. The body weakens before it collapses. Trust erodes before it breaks. Opportunities fade before they disappear. And all the while, you start telling yourself, this is temporary. Denial doesn't look dramatic. It looks responsible. It looks practical. It sounds like, I just need to get through this month. I'll start when things calm down. I deserve a break. And sometimes you do. But when the break becomes the baseline, when comfort becomes avoidance, when delay becomes identity, that's when the illusion solidifies. You start believing this is who you are. I'm just not disciplined. I'm just bad at relationships. I'm just always tired. And what began as a habit becomes a story. And what becomes a story becomes your reality. There is something deeply unsettling about realizing that nothing has to explode for everything to change. It can happen slowly, so slowly, you barely notice. Until one day you wake up and realize the person you thought you were becoming never arrived. And yet, even now, it still feels manageable. You still feel in control. You still believe you can pivot whenever you choose. That belief, that quiet confidence, is the most dangerous comfort of all, because the first warning sign is never loud. It's a subtle shift, a small compromise, a tiny voice that says, this isn't ideal, but it happens fine. And the moment you accept fine as permanent, the first crack has already formed, but you don't see the fracture yet. Not clearly, not enough to scare you. And that's exactly why the next phase is already beginning. At first, it's almost invisible. You don't wake up one morning feeling broken. You wake up feeling slightly off, a little more tired than usual, a little less patient, a little less excited about things that once mattered. You blame the weather. You blame your schedule. You blame your age. You never blame the habit. The second habit begins quietly, numbing instead of feeling. It doesn't look destructive. It looks normal, scrolling longer than you meant to, eating when you sit not hungry, drinking just to relax, watching another episode to avoid the silence. You tell yourself you deserve it. You worked hard today. You handled stress. You need a break. And maybe you do. But relief and escape are not the same thing. One restores you. The other postpones you. The first cracks don't show up in your bank account. They show up in your energy. Your focus shortens. Your attention fragments. Your sleep becomes lighter. Your thoughts grow heavier. You begin living in distraction. Because distraction is painless. Feeling is not. When something unsettles you, a quiet dissatisfaction, a creeping loneliness, a fear you can't name, you reach for noise. Music, news, messages, anything. Anything but stillness. Because stillness forces reflection. And reflection forces truth. The truth is uncomfortable. You are not as aligned as you pretend to be. There are conversations you are avoiding. Boundaries you still are not enforcing. Dreams you sit quietly postponed, and instead of confronting them, you soften the edge with stimulation. Dopamine becomes your daily anesthesia. You don't notice the dependency forming. You only notice that silence feels unbearable. That fits the crack. When you can't sit alone without reaching for something. When 10 minutes of boredom feels like anxiety. When rest feels restless. Your body begins whispering. More fatigue. More irritability. More mental fog. You assume you need more motivation. But what you need is less noise. Relationships begin to thin. Not dramatically. Subtly. You so present, but not fully. You still listening, but half distracted. You still responding, but not deeply. The people around you feel it before you do. They sense the distance, the micro disconnections, the way your eyes drift, the way your patience shortens. But no one says anything, because nothing is technically wrong. This is how cracks spread. Quietly, under the surface. You start waking up slightly unfulfilled, but you don't call it unhappiness. You call it adulthood. You call it responsibility. You call it realism. The third habit forms during this stage, lowering your standards silently, not publicly, internally. You tolerate conversations that drain you. You accept work that numbs you. You abandon routines that once strengthened you. You begin negotiating with your potential. I don't need to be that disciplined. I don't need to try that hard. I'm doing okay. And okay becomes your ceiling. The unsettling part. From the outside, your life still looks functional. Used to not collapsing. Used to coping. But coping is not thriving. Coping is maintenance mode. And maintenance mode slowly erodes ambition. There's a moment, and it's small, when you realize you haven't felt deeply alive in a while. Not depressed, not devastated, just muted. Like someone lowered the volume on your own existence. You push the thought away. You tell yourself, it's a phase. But phases don't usually last years. Cracks don't announce themselves. They widen in the dark, under routine, under busyness, under distraction. And here sits what makes this stage so dangerous. You still believe you stir in control. You still believe you can stop any time. You still believe none of this is permanent. But habits don't need your permission to deepen. They only need repetition. And repetition has already begun shaping your identity. Used to becoming someone slightly more passive, slightly more reactive, slightly less intentional. It's barely noticeable, but it's happening. The first cracks are not dramatic. They set a quiet compromises. And every compromise whispers the same lie. This won't matter. But it does. It's accumulating. In your health, in your relationships, in your self-respect. And soon, the cracks will no longer stay hidden. Because what you ignore gently today will confront you loudly tomorrow. And when it does, denial will no longer feel safe. The cracks you ignored now begin to widen. What once was subtle is becoming visible. A missed workout is now chronic fatigue. A postponed conversation is now resentment. A distracted moment is now a fractured connection. And yet, you still tell yourself, it's fine. I can manage. Denial at this stage is louder, more insistent, more convincing. It wears many faces. Rationalization, justification, blame. I've been busy. Is this not the right time? They don't understand. You start seeing the warning signs in others before yourself. A colleague collapses from burnout. A friend loses someone they loved. An acquaintance falls ill from neglect. You nod, you sympathize, you feel pity. But you also think, that happened to me. The fourth habit creeps in here. Comparing yourself to the wrong standards. You measure yourself, not against your potential, but against the failures of others. You tell yourself, at least I'm not that bad. And that thought, simple, small, comfortable, becomes armor. Meanwhile, subtle cracks multiply. Energy dwindles. Motivation falters. Distractions multiply. You cling to comfort as though it were a lifeline. You avoid risk. You postpone the difficult. You numb the uncomfortable. And the world reinforces it. Society applauds balance over ambition. Friends encourage taking it easy. Media glorifies distraction, consumption, endless entertainment. You convince yourself, I am responsible. I am careful. I am practical. But what you call responsibility is often fear. What you call practicality is often surrender. The human mind is remarkable at ignoring danger. It rewires itself to see normalcy where there is decay. It whispers, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry yet. And every time you listen, the cracks grow stronger. Emotional tension builds quietly too. You notice the small irritations, your partner's tone, your child's complaints, your colleagues' habits. You snap more easily. You feel isolated. You long for escape. But instead of confronting it, you distract yourself. And distraction becomes habitual. It's safer than vulnerability. It's easier than truth. The fifth habit appears. Avoiding responsibility for discomfort. You wait for someone else to fix your career, your health, your relationships. You hope the problem will resolve itself. You assume the world will accommodate your avoidance. And often, it seems like it does. But beneath the surface, consequences are accumulating. The distance grows. The resentment grows. The fatigue grows. The small missteps, the ones you shrugged off, are now compounding. You feel pressure building, though you can't name it yet. A nagging sense that life is less vibrant than it should be. A quiet tension in your chest that you ignore. Denial begins to fail. Hints of reality peek through. A doctor's warning. A missed opportunity. A strained relationship. A sense of wasted time. You push them aside, rationalize them, and retreat back to comfort. But every retreat takes you closer to a realization you cannot postpone. One day, the cumulative weight of avoidance will no longer be subtle. It will press down on you. It will demand recognition. And when that day comes, you will see the cost of every habit you ignored. The first cracks were small. The second cracks were subtle. Now the cracks are shouting. And you will have to choose, face the truth, or continue pretending it doesn't exist. But by then, the choice will no longer be easy, because the moment you could have changed is already slipping away. There is a moment in every life, a moment that looks ordinary, a day like any other, a conversation you postpone, a choice you delay, and yet, this is the day that defines the rest of your life. It's subtle, almost invisible. One more missed workout, one more ignored symptom, one more half-hearted apology, one more opportunity you let pass. And with each small decision, the path narrows. The sixth habit is at play here. Procrastinating the necessary, assuming there will be a better time. You tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow, next month, next year. But the universe rarely waits. And life is indifferent. History is full of examples. Civilizations that ignored early warnings. Families that postponed difficult conversations. Individuals who put off action until it was too late. And when the consequences arrive, there is no second chance. The cracks you once ignored now demand attention. The body signals more strongly. Relationships strain under the weight of avoidance. Dreams that once seemed within reach slip quietly into memory. And still the mind bargains. It's not irreversible. I can fix it. But repair is no longer simple. This is the point of no return, where small compromises accumulate into permanent consequences, where patterns once harmless become chains, where delay becomes destiny. The seventh habit is woven here. Relying on willpower instead of structure. You think motivation will save you. That effort alone will undo months, years, decades of neglect. But willpower is fragile. It fades with fatigue, stress, and life's relentless pressures. Structure, discipline, consistent action is the only antidote, and you don't have that yet. Regret begins before awareness. You sense it in fleeting moments, a pang of shame when looking in the mirror, a twinge of guilt when seeing a loved one disappointed, a quiet grief when recalling dreams left untouched. You push it down, you distract yourself, you justify. But regret is patient. It waits. It accumulates. By the time you fully recognize the damage, the opportunity to prevent it is gone. The habits you tolerated quietly for years, the small compromises you justified every day, the distractions you leaned on instead of confronting reality, all of them converge, and what you once could have fixed with effort, intention, or courage, now demands sacrifice beyond your capacity. This is the heavy truth. There is always a last chance, but it comes quietly, and if you ignore it, it passes forever. What follows is the inevitable consequence of delay, denial, and comfort. And the collapse, slow, silent, unrelenting, is already beginning. It begins, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A missed heartbeat in your schedule, a conversation that never happened, a body slightly weaker than yesterday, a relationship slightly colder than the week before. The habits you tolerated quietly now demand attention. The eighth habit reveals itself here, ignoring warning signs until they scream. You thought fatigue was normal. You thought tension was temporary. You thought disappointment could be endured indefinitely. But nothing can endure indefinitely. And slowly, life starts to feel heavy. Confusion sets in. Energy wanes. Hope shrinks. You watch as small failures compound into larger ones. The career that seemed stable falters. The friendships that seemed secure fray. The body that seems strong betrays you. This is collapse. Not catastrophic. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just inexorable. It creeps through routines. It seeps into your thoughts. It erodes confidence. It consumes patience. The ninth habit becomes visible, sacrificing long-term stability for temporary relief. You take the easy route. You avoid the hard work. You comfort yourself at the cost of progress. And now, the consequences are unavoidable. You experience disorientation. What once felt normal now feels fragile. What once seemed controllable now seems precarious. You cannot ignore the tension in your body. You cannot dismiss the strain in your relationships. You cannot unhear the silence that has replaced connection. Fear becomes familiar. Not sudden terror, not panic, but a slow, oppressive weight that sits on your chest and makes every choice harder. The final habit surfaces in full force, failing to take responsibility until it is too late. You notice patterns. You see mistakes. You understand consequences. And yet, often, action is impossible. Because action requires energy you no longer possess. Courage you no longer recognize, time that has already slipped beyond your grasp. This is the emptiness of consequence. You are not punished with spectacle. You are punished with quiet, persistent loss. The life you could have built exists only in memory now. The relationships you could have nurtured exist only in regret. The health you could have preserved exists only in what could have been. Collapse is not dramatic. It is invisible until it is complete. And the more you resisted discomfort, the more permanent the impact. The world continues around you, oblivious, indifferent. And you are left to witness what you ignored for decades. The question is, no longer can I fix this. The question is, what remains after I finally see the truth? The aftermath is quiet. There are no sirens, no flashing lights. No instant reckoning, only a slow, lingering emptiness. You notice the spaces that once held possibility, now filled with absence. A room that used to echo laughter now only hums with memory. A calendar that once brimmed with plans now lies bare. A body that once carried vitality now trembles with fatigue. The 10th habit fully exposes itself here, living passively instead of intentionally. It is the culmination of every small compromise, every postponed decision, every moment of avoidance, every time you numbed, distracted, delayed, or rationalized. It is the quiet life you built, without meaning to. You begin to see the full pattern, the habits that felt harmless, the small compromises you justified, the distractions, the numbing, the deferrals. All of them created this landscape, a landscape of lost time, of muted potential, of quiet sorrow. And with clarity comes reflection, not dramatic insight, not sudden wisdom, but a steady, unavoidable recognition. I could have started earlier. I could have confronted discomfort. I could have chosen intention over ease. You think of the people you might have been, the person who ran with energy, the person who loved boldly, the person who spoke truth without fear, and you mourn them. Some nights you lie awake, and the world feels heavier. You measure what remains. You measure what is lost. And sometimes you weep for what you never fully embraced. But realization does not undo consequence. It does not restore opportunities. It does not resurrect years. It only teaches the weight of avoidance. The hardest truth is that life is patient and also unforgiving. It waits while we delay. It offers chances while we are distracted. It tests us while we rationalize. And then it moves on. The remnants of choice, once ignored, are all that remain. The quiet regret, the lingering fatigue, the relationships strained beyond repair. These are the echoes of the habits you tolerated. And yet even now, there is understanding. Even in emptiness, there is clarity. Even in loss, there is knowledge. You finally see what was always true. You cannot outrun the consequences of what you ignored. And soon, a final warning will come. A warning that demands attention. One that speaks directly to the person you still can become. Now listen closely. This is no longer about theory. No longer about what-ifs. No longer about habits that seem harmless. This is about you. Right now. The danger isn't stit in dramatic moments. It isn't stit in collapse. It isn't stit in the mistakes you can name. The danger is in tolerating small decay, in ignoring discomfort, in postponing courage. Every day you do nothing. Every day you distract, delay or numb yourself. You shape the person you will inevitably become. And the person you tolerate today may be the one who lives with regret tomorrow. This is the final warning. You cannot wait for life to force change. You cannot hope that someone else will save you. You cannot assume tomorrow will be easier than today. Your habits are forming your future. Right now, silently, irreversibly. Look at your life. Really look. The energy you expend on distraction, the comfort you cling to, the fear you avoid. Every choice matters. And the habits you ignore. The 10 small compromises, the daily evasions, will define the life you accept. You still have time, but time is quiet. It does not announce itself. It slips. So confront the habits that erode you. Face the truths you avoid. Act before your potential decays. Because life does not wait, and one day you will wake up and realize it was never too late. Until it is,